I'm meeting with Keith Stoney, who is in a unique position because not only is he a practicing attorney, but he also served in various capacities as an attorney, and as a justice court judge. And so today I've asked him to come speak to me and to you about what to look for in good criminal defense attorneys, because you've been able to evaluate them as both the person on one side of the bench as well as someone who has done criminal defense work and prosecuting. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
So, as you know, we talked about this. We met for lunch beforehand, as we often do. We do divorce and family law work here, but there are many times when issues in divorce will overlap with criminal, domestic violence, or other things like that, and so people will often find themselves fighting a war on two fronts. So and there are all kinds of qualities of attorneys as well. There are excellent attorneys for a good price. There are horrible attorneys for a rapacious price. What should people who have never hired an attorney before, what kind of common sense practical things that they can see and evaluate in their own way, what should they be looking for when they go look for a criminal defense counsel?
Probably the first thing is be leery of those that promise you anything. If they promise you that they can do something with the case, or promise you that the charges will be dismissed, promise you that they can get them lowered, be leery of them. The defense attorney doesn't control the prosecution, which would make those kinds of offers, nor do they control the judge and what the judge might do or accept in a criminal case. Second, I'd say be leery of the defense attorney that tells you that they can not only accomplish something, but they know and understand certain people in the system and can get along and can get you a deal because of who they know.
So playing devil's advocate slightly, like, but why not? I mean, wouldn't it be good to find a criminal defense attorney who tells me he has a good relationship with that prosecutor and owns him, or at the very least says, yeah, we're friends and he'll usually cut me some slack that he won't cut others. Same thing with the judge. The judge knows me. The judge is my golfing buddy, which we know that can be fraught. But how about the judge respects me immensely and knows that I'm a square dealer, so I can get you a better deal than other people the judge isn't so familiar with. Why wouldn't people want to do that?
Certainly there are those attorneys that as a judge, when they said something was a fact or that something had occurred, I believed them. Because they never pushed it with me. I could always depend on it. I mean, even if they said the sky is green, I would get up and go out and look at least. I wouldn't just brush it off because they were that straightforward with me. But to say that I can get you a deal, I bet if you talk to the prosecutor that attorney says is in his pocket, the prosecutor's not going to tell you that.
If you could be a fly on the wall, that prosecutor would go, well, no, he's a decent enough guy, but no, he doesn't own me.
Right.
I don't make him special favors.
Although there are favors, I'm sure there are. I don't see that occurring, and certainly with judges. The judges are trained to be neutral. Judges are trained to step outside of the emotions of the situation and just look at the facts that are there. That's why probably another thing to look at is attorneys that aren't prepared. That was really frustrating for me as a judge. When an attorney wasn't prepared, and I found myself having to almost help the attorney and the defendant along because they weren't prepared for a defense in a particular case.
Any ideas as to how to find someone who is prepared, someone who will be prepared when you hire that person?
Well, it's like anything else. Probably don't believe the hype. But second, I would interview him personally, just ask him some questions. If you get a good feel, and most of us, I think, have a pretty good barometer for gauging when somebody is going to be on our side, is going to fight for us and have our back. We can all make mistakes, and I've made my share of bad choices when it comes to those kinds of things. But I think you meet with somebody personally. And it's not always the highest priced person that you're looking for either. In any kind of law, there are very competent people that have a very favorable or a very fair price structure. And now that I've been doing defense work for about 18 months, I'm seeing some very good defense attorneys that I never saw as a judge. And I've watched. I come in early to court to see how the court's going, how the judge does particular things, because I don't want to embarrass myself or my client. And at the same time, I've been impressed with some of the attorneys that I've seen. I've also gone, I don't think I'd do that for my client, or attempt to do that for my client. And attorneys are interesting animals. Keep in mind that we can argue with each other, but by and large, a lot of us can then go to lunch together after we've argued like a cat and dog in a courtroom. That doesn't hurt your position. It simply means that we're good at taking the position that best serves our client in an honest and fair way and putting forward their best foot so that we can do that.
In that setting, where we're expected to make arguments, we're expected to point out the flaws, we're not taking personal shots.
Mhm.
We can, if we want to accuse a lawyer of falsifying something or hiding something, we might do that, but it's only because we feel that we ought.
Mhm.
But we can still say, all right, I really kind of tore your defense to pieces, but that's not you that I was tearing apart, it was your defense.
Sure. As a defense attorney now, I learned something years ago. There was an old attorney out there, that's not fair to say he was old, his name was Robert Van Skyver. And Bob always used to, when he would cross-examine a police officer and basically give them a new navel in the process, when the case was over, I always admired him because he would go up with the cop and say, sorry I had to do that to you. Let's go to lunch and I'm going to tell you and teach you so that this doesn't happen to you again. He was about the law. In that particular case he won because of what he did to the officer, but he would tell the officer how to prepare his case or her case and what to look for in the preparation of their case so that didn't happen to him again. Now, as a prosecutor in that position, I always appreciated that, and I always thought that was classy.
Well, of course you did, yeah. Your
Yeah.
police officers
He
would be
trained my
better
cop
prepared.
for me, yeah.
And what's interesting, I would think, is that future criminal defense clients of his might have said, well, wait a minute, now you're giving away all my opportunities to win the case by destroying the police officers. Like, well, I'm not teaching them a bag of tricks.
Mhm.
I'm teaching them to nab guilty people and let innocent people off.
Actually, as a defense attorney, I find it to my advantage to have a very good officer on the case who has covered all the bases and who has discovered all the facts. Because in any case, there are facts that benefit and there are facts that hurt. And if an officer is myopic and only sees the things that are related to the criminal activity, that officer is going to have a difficult time with me in court. But if that officer's seen the whole picture and has recognized that while there are these things that are wrong, there were also these things that were right, that makes for a fair circumstance.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier.
Has your experience judging cases made you a better defense attorney?
I think it has because there were a lot of times when I would think to myself as a judge, that didn't do anything for me. That didn't float my boat. That argument wasn't made very well. I wanted to know more facts. That was probably my biggest frustration as a judge, is the only thing I know is what the attorneys told me. And so I knew I didn't get the 100% of everything. And the attorneys only told me what they wanted me to hear, so I would do what they wanted me to do. And I was a firm believer in asking questions, and it frustrated both sides, I think, because I would ask some questions that they didn't want me to hear or to understand.
And it seems, and you just mentioned about, was it Van Skyver?
Mm-hmm.
He would say, look, I'd rather that I teach you how to prepare your case, officer, than have to tear you a new one or something like that. And so, let me see if I get this, because I think I just learned something very helpful in my practice. If I go into my case and tell the judge or commissioner, let me tell you, I think what every fact you may find useful, good and bad, because number one, I can tell you I know all the facts and I still think I should win. That would score points.
That would score big points with me.
It's like, yeah, you know what? I know there are things in my favor and things that aren't, but on balance, I still win. And I'm so familiar with this case, my client and I are far more credible than these guys who are playing their cards so close to their vest and frustrated by you when you ask questions that are inconvenient or awkward.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that hits the nail right on the head.
That's very, I've always tended to feel as though you got nothing to fear from, what is it, was it Barnum that said you can't con an honest man?
Mm-hmm.
And I always felt the same way. It's like, look, come in and say, in a protective order case, oh yeah, they were arguing all right, Yeah, they were screaming and yelling. The neighbors were worried. But
Mhm.
I defy you to find anybody that saw any marks. I don't, there's no broken pottery or anything like that. And I'm glad to hear that, because I always felt like if you said, look, I believe in the truth, and that's what you're going to rule upon, that you're going to let the facts determine what you do. Yeah, all the facts don't work in my favor. They never do in a dispute, or I should say rarely.
Well, remember too, that the good attorney can make the large look small and the small look large. And if you're gonna have credibility with the court, that's one of the ways you obtain that credibility, is to always, in front of them, lay all of the facts out, the good, the bad, the ugly. I just think I just dated myself. Okay, yeah. And it's very helpful for the court. I can remember once saying to a prosecutor, Mr. So-and-so, the defense attorney, is starting to smile. He's practiced in front of me enough that I know when I see that smile that something's about to happen in his favor. Do we really want to go further with this? And the prosecutor, being young and bold and naive, wanted to go further. And about 2 minutes down the road, it wasn't just the sledgehammer that fell, it was an anvil that landed on his case and destroyed everything, and I had to dismiss the entire case. So you also learn your opponent. Learn and know what kind of an attorney there is. There are aggressive attorneys that are good attorneys. There are aggressive attorneys that turn everybody off. There are quiet attorneys that sneak up on you. Those are the ones that make me nervous, to be honest, as a practitioner. The prosecutor that's quiet, gentle, always polite to me. I'm just wondering, when's the shoe gonna fall? When are they going to enter in something that I've missed, something like that? And then there are attorneys that, frankly, maybe shouldn't be attorneys or don't understand it. I've often thought, especially in criminal law, I've watched it for years, that there are some people that just walk in to the courtroom and understand it. They're perfect in the courtroom. They know how to move. They're in their mind. They must see the flow chart of how things work and what's there. Then there are others that come in and they don't have the slightest clue of what's going on. They're not able to walk and chew gum at the same time, so to speak. And then in between that are those that can learn to be good at what it is. But unfortunately, there are some that can't. Now, an attorney is always talking about how they settled the case. If I were hiring an attorney, I'd be nervous about that. Because I'd want my attorney not to be afraid to go to court. There are times when we should go to court and we should fight a case, especially when the other side's being unreasonable. And if you say, I've negotiated all of my cases in the last 5 years, that means you've probably not done the best for your client during that period.
That's a good one. I would tend to agree. And again, this isn't my, me talking, but yeah, an attorney that's willing to say, well, they're not backing down. I wasn't able to settle this satisfactorily. Let's take it to court because you could win. You should win. I think I can win. Now that's risky, but it may be better than pleading guilty to something you didn't do.
Sure.
Or
There is that all or none problem when you go to court. We're all nervous about that, and we as attorneys are very sensitive to that. We know that we're going to be able to go home at night, but our client might be in jail. Okay, and so we explain that to our clients, and the attorney that's not willing to explain that to you, you have to be leery of. You have to be concerned about. The one that says, oh no, I know we can win this and everything else. No, but you say, I think we can win this, but I can't make any promises to you, but I think we can pull this out. I think you can walk away from here a free man. And here's why, 1, 2, 3, 4. You should never be afraid to go to trial. And yet, in our day and age, as we talked about at lunch, too many attorneys are just willing to settle. And even if it's not to the best interest of their client, they settle, and then they're happy with that, and they can move on to the next case.
yeah, they'll settle because, and there are many reasons, they'll settle because there's this culture arising that people who litigate are doing something bad. There are people who will settle because they're not good in court, and so they don't want to see the inside of a courtroom because it scares them, or they're inept at conducting a trial. And they may have other reasons too. But I would agree with you, but let me see if I got this right. Finding a good defense attorney is someone who'd say, I'm not afraid to go to trial. Now let me tell you if you should go to trial or not.
Right. Yeah, my wife thinks I'm a little sick because I love to go to trial. In fact, I have to warn my clients, look, I really want to go to trial on this case. I really want to hammer this officer or this witness. Something's wrong here. On the other hand, you need to understand. I always tell them, you need to understand. So I'm not right 100% of the time. I might be 98% right, but you might be part of that 2% that could go down.
Or I could be convinced that I've got this whole thing sewn up, only to have the prosecution
Yeah,
pull
rug
out the proverbial smoking gun
Yeah.
that I didn't know about and that you, as the client, either didn't know about or decided to keep me in the dark on. Let's finish with that idea. Alan Dershowitz said the reason that our criminal defense system works is because I think he said about 85% of people that are charged with crimes are guilty. He goes, if it weren't that way, then our system wouldn't work.
And 85% might be low.
Yeah. So, what do you tell people who say, oh, I know I did something wrong, and or I did exactly what I'm accused of, but I'll get a good criminal, I've heard there are good criminal defense attorneys. I watch TV, and I see people that can do amazing things and can discombobulate the prosecutors and witnesses so much that I can walk on a technicality. What do you say to people who are hoping for that?
Oh, I might talk for 20 minutes about that. The way that people talk about technicalities, it's almost like it's a four-letter word, a technicality, so to speak. And whenever somebody is, let's use the usual terms, got off on a technicality, that means that person's rights were protected. And when that person's rights are protected, my rights are protected, your rights are protected. There's no such thing really as a technicality. Our system is set up and it requires that law enforcement do it legally. They must follow a set procedure and stay within the guidelines set down by case law and the law itself, statutory. When they don't do that, the only thing we can do to tell them they need to stop is to throw that evidence out or to not make that evidence available to them so that they will learn to do it correctly the first time. I don't have a bit of problem as an attorney, as I think a God-fearing man, of melting those two things together and saying my obligation is to the Constitution, my obligation is to people's rights. And when I'm defending my clients' rights, they're not getting off on a technicality.
Yeah.
I'm helping society as a whole. We're training police officers to do it better. We're training society that this is what the law is, and we're telling our clients, you got off this time, be very careful next time.
I had a client who had marijuana in his car, and he was illegally searched, and I told him, I said, you are guilty of this crime, but the good news is you were illegally searched, and I will defend you, not because I like drug use, but because your rights were violated, and I think I can get you off because nobody would have caught you had it not been for the illegal search. I think in a nutshell that defines what's going on.
That's correct.
Here's my final question then along those lines. What about someone who comes in, and let's assume that they actually just lay all their cards on the table. I did it, I'm guilty, that's exactly as the report says.
Most of my clients do that.
And let's also say, and the police did nothing wrong, but you are being asked, let's assume I'm your hypothetical client, I want you to frame somebody. I think I can make it look like somebody else did it. I'll say anything you want me to say. I'll find an alibi if I need one. You know, are there attorneys out there, in the wonderful state of Utah that do that? Are they fairly common? Are they pretty rare? And what would you say to someone who's either a real piece of work and wants to get off, or someone who's scared to death and said, look, I'm really sorry for what I've done, but I just can't go to jail. I can't go to prison. I'll say anything. I'll do anything. I'll lie through my teeth. I'll see that somebody else goes to jail before I do. What do you say to that guy?
See, I always have a couple of choices in that circumstance. I can shake that person's hand and tell them, I don't think this is gonna work out for us. I wish you the very best, and if I see you in Walmart tomorrow, I'll cheer you on. What I have told people is what you just said to me is, I can't unethically put you on the stand. I'm not gonna let you lie. If I know you're lying, I'm glad you told me these things. We're gonna tell the truth. And basically the truth is gonna set you free here. If the truth is going to hurt you, then that's the way it's gonna be, and if the truth's gonna hurt you so bad, then we won't put you on the stand to do that. I'm not gonna frame somebody for you. If there's somebody legitimately out there that should have been investigated or is a suspect, I will be all
No, I'm
over
not talking about that. They've got me dead to rights, and my only hope is setting something up and creating a diversion by just fabricating something out of whole cloth.
Well, I'm not naive enough to think that there are no attorneys out there that would do that. Unfortunately, there probably are. I don't know who they are. And I'd just tell this person that I can't do that for them. I'd tell them the attorney-client privilege says I can't repeat anything that's just here unless you tell me you're gonna commit a crime.
Right.
But, yeah, you're on your own. You're gonna have to find somebody else. Good luck.
Last question that just comes to mind. What about people that then go in and say, I committed the crime, and I'm scared to death?
Most people do commit the crime.
What can you do for me?
Most of them are scared.
Keith, what can you do for me? Why should I hire you? Shouldn't I just go in and plead guilty because I don't have a lot of money? In fact, that's what I was doing. I was stealing money so I could live, and then...
We just had this conversation in my firm the other day. The vote is that I'm a little too honest with the clients, okay? And when they say, what can you do for me, I tell them, okay? And I'll tell them worst scenario. If you walked in tomorrow and pled guilty to this without an attorney, here's what I think the judges would do. Now, I do know the judges well enough. I know which ones follow the bail schedule almost to the T. I know which ones will kind of play with that a little bit. And I know which ones probably don't know what the bail schedule is, okay? So I can tell them what I think worst scenario will be for them. And then I can say, but I think if you hire me, here's what I can do for you. And on those that say things like, Keith, I can't go to jail, I'll lose my job, then that's maybe where we need to put our emphasis. And if you look at a case, and the first thing I look at in a case is to see if anything happened that was wrong, if anybody's rights were violated. And if there were, then you file motions to suppress that evidence. If there were not, then the second thing you do is to look and see if there are facts there to support every one of the criminal charges. If there are, then you go to the third part of it. If they're not, then you argue motions to dismiss, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the third part is if everything's there and you're going, they got you by the nose, okay, we are in trouble here, then you start working towards sentencing immediately. And you can head things off at the pass by putting your client into a rehabilitation center. You can do things that you know will influence this judge to go a little lighter on them, or to say, okay, this person, I have their attention, we're not gonna see them again. I do not necessarily have to put them in jail for a required amount of time from what's there.
Excellent. Now, what a great note to end on, where there can still be hope, even if you're guilty, even if you're likely to face some kind of punishment, and what a good lawyer can do, as opposed to just turning yourself in and putting yourself all alone at the mercy of the court.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate you taking the time with us.
Thank you.